Have you ever left a menopause appointment thinking, I still don't actually know what to do? If you're a woman in midlife, this episode is for you. This year on All About You, I sat down with some of the world's leading menopause experts. And again, the same questions kept coming up. How much protein should I actually be eating? Do vaginal hormones really matter? As a woman, do I need testosterone? Why does getting a good night's sleep suddenly feel impossible? Today, I've pulled together some of the most practical, evidence-based menopause advice I've heard this year that you can put into action starting now. Welcome to All About You. I'm Dr. Shauna Watts, GP and women's health advocate. Every week, I bring you evidence-based conversations that make complicated health topics simple, practical, and empowering, especially during midlife, when many women feel dismissed, confused, or overwhelmed by conflicting advice. In today's episode, we're doing something a little different. This is part of one of a special menopause mashup, bringing together some of the most impactful conversations I've had this year and distilling them into a menopause cheat sheet. By the end of this episode, I hope you'll understand why muscle and protein become non-negotiable in midlife, how vaginal hormones work and why they matter far beyond comfort, and the important role of testosterone in women's health, and simple, science-backed strategies to help support menopausal symptoms like brain fog and difficulty sleeping. You'll be hearing from world-leading menopause experts like Dr. Mary Claire Haver, Dr. Rachel Rubin, Dr. Kelly Casperson, and myself, Dr. Shauna Watts. This information is general in nature and is not intended to replace personalized medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider regarding your specific situation.
If you want to hang on to your muscle, after 35, you must do resistance training. There's no way out of it. You must lift and lift heavy. Because those signals coming from the hormones don't work as well. We can give you back hormone therapy, but it's never going to be as good as your 25-year-old ovaries. So I can't replace that, And so you must eat enough protein to support the growth of muscle, and you must do the lifting. Creatine is very helpful here as well when we talk about supplementation. And then we're pushing fat into the abdominal cavity where we've never really had it before. So across the menopause transition, a woman's total body fat, 8% of it is visceral or intra-abdominal or belly fat in layman's terms. You take that same woman through cross menopause, that goes up to 23% with no changes in diet and exercise. Documented in multiple studies with MRIs. Yes, it's so unfair. So is it inevitable? No, but it takes work. So what do we know works? This is what I counsel my patients about. I have a body scanner. I do the in-body impedance scanner. We look at muscle mass and visceral fat. Those are the only two things we really look at. I don't care what she weighs. We don't talk about weight or BMI anymore, okay? I say, okay, your visceral fat is high. What do we know works? High fiber diets. Eating lots and lots of food rich in fiber. Okay, at least 25 to 35 grams a day. Cardiovascular benefits really start topping out around 38 grams per day for women for decreasing her, and dementia risk as high as 45. So I'm like, most women in the US are getting 10 a day. So they're getting like a third to maybe a fourth of what they really should be eating. Movement, consistent, cardio here, zone 2 training. So not a leisurely walk, a walk like there's a bear chasing you and you can't run, like really, really getting there where you can talk through the workout, but you're struggling. So that's kind of zone 2. That's where our maximum fat burning happens. Lifting weights, super helpful, keeping those muscles strong. Probiotics, so eating a diet rich in probiotics or supplementing with probiotics has also been shown to be helpful. Turmeric, some decent studies looking at menopausal women and visceral fat accumulation. Turmeric is an anti-inflammatory, can be a little tough on the liver, so talk to your doctor first. That's not one you want to take, without being followed. But there's lots and lots of things that we can do to limit visceral fat accumulation. And hormone therapy, of course, is probably the best thing that you could do is limit the time your body's away from estrogen.
That's one of the big questions people always ask me is when they start HRT, am I going to lose weight? And sometimes they'll come back 6 weeks later for their first review and they'll say, oh, I didn't really lose any weight.
It's not a magic pill. It's not a magic weight loss pill. Take that out of your head. Most of my patients follow me on social, so they kind of know or they've read the book. So they kind of come in prepped and ready. But that is something that initially you should tell you, this is not a magic weight loss pill, but this will make your efforts easier.
Well, I even think when you get someone to be able to sleep through the night, then
Well, it lowers their cortisol level.
and they're going to just even feel more like going for that walk.
Right. Everything gets better. They eat less. They have less hunger. They have, multiple studies looking at sleep deprivation and increasing appetite and decreasing movement. You're just tired, all of that compounds. And if we can get her back to sleep, then all of her efforts are going to work better in her favor.
You've probably seen all the memes of women saying that eating all the protein has become a full-time job. So tell me, why do we suddenly need more protein? People seem to be very confused by this.
So, I grew up in the 80s and I, was always thin, and I never ever thought about how much protein I was eating. I was always just looking at calories so that I could stay thin. And if I was thin, I was healthy, and that's all I needed to do. And little did I know I was chipping away at my bone and muscle strength, which are critical to me now, right? Critical to keep me out of a nursing home. And that is totally dependent on protein. So I'm telling my daughters, I'm telling my, patients coming in for preemptive menopause counseling, start these habits now before the shit hits the fan so that you have this stuff down, and it's just going to make your transition so much easier. Women are not eating enough protein. They tend to eat almost nothing with breakfast, a little bit with lunch, and kind of stack everything in the last little bit. In order to avoid frailty and sarcopenia, loss of muscle mass, you need about 1.6 grams per day, and you should divide it up with every meal and snack. So 1.6 grams for every kilogram of lean body mass is going to be somewhere, like for me, 100 to 120. So most of my patients are falling between 80 to 130 grams per day. Now that's to avoid frailty. That is not to max out her maximum muscle mass. I mean, if you're bodybuilding, if you're doing serious weight training, you probably need more than that in order to really build.
I know you've got a culinary medicine qualification. Can you give our listeners a couple of hints? Like, what is a really good breakfast and lunch to have?
So I have a little trick I like called the Mary Claire Parfait. And so, if you're not dairy sensitive, it's just plain Greek yogurt. In the US, I'm sure here, I went to grad school in New Zealand, so I kind of, the plain Greek yogurt, and add your own fruit to it. So I like to throw in a mix of berries. I put in flax, chia, and hemp seeds. And, to add in protein, I'll take a scoop of my favorite protein powder, and I'll either eat that as just a yogurt parfait or, throw some ice, a little bit of water, and turn that into a shake to help me hit those protein goals. And that way you've got your probiotics, you've got anthocyanins, you've got fiber, with the chia, you've got omega-3s. You're kind of hitting so many boxes, and you're getting a wide variety. I tell my patients, especially those who are on GLP-1s, we have probably 20% of our patients end up on a GLP-1, to really focus on plants and protein. Protein, lots of lean, healthy sources, and making sure we have this little goal. And I stole this from Zoe Nutrition.
Oh, I love them.
Love them. Is 30 plants a week. So we did a strong challenge at the beginning of the year. I love doing challenges a couple times a year with my followers. And one of the goals, and this was not a weight loss challenge, this was a get strong challenge. So I had a trainer come in and do some very basic workouts, teaching them, but we had 30 plants a week. And that's hard. I mean, if you don't do that, it's easy for me in Sydney on this trip. I mean, I'm having avocado toast and they're throwing all kind of greens on there. I'm like, this is amazing. I love the food here. And then looking for protein to be eaten every meal and snack. Just stay on top of your protein goals. So I've got there's these delicious like dehydrated edamame beans that are like salted or with different flavors. And that little packet has like 12 grams of protein and probably 8 or 9 grams of fiber. I'm like, this is the best snack ever. I always have them. They're everywhere I go. They're in every drawer in my clinic, so between patients, I can quickly get a handful and snack.
Okay, that's great. I know that you have supplements, and I think it's fantastic, to be honest, because patients are so overwhelmed. I'm sure.
I don't think clinicians can sell supplements did I get that wrong?
Yeah, no, not really.
Okay.
Yeah, but in pharmacies in Australia, I'm sure it's the same in the US. In fact, I've been there. The aisles are really confusing. There's like so many.
And we have health food stores and we have pharmacies.
Yeah, and you don't know where to start. And people are really quite overwhelmed as to what they should do.
So here's my best tool. And this is what I learned, from my nutrition certification. download a free tracker. And there's, my daughter has an undergraduate degree, the one who's in medical school now, in nutrition science. Like, she was going to become a registered dietitian, but she took the MCAT and surprised us and went to medical school. So, but in her undergrad, they used something called Chronometer. It's Chronometer, and it was developed for nutrition science, for dietitians and PhD nutritionists. And so it's not about calorie counting and, keto, or it can do all that, but, it's really has a really clean database. So I recommend that to my patients. I'm like, just track what you eat for 2 weeks. Eat what you think is healthy and see where your gaps are. The supplements we sell are nutritional supplements. We're not selling menopause cures. I wish I could find one, but there's no such thing. Nothing will resuscitate your ovaries yet, right? And so, but most of my patients are deficient in fiber. I'm sure yours are very deficient in vitamin D.
Yeah.
And so I created a vitamin D, vitamin K, omega-3 combo because it's easy and I'm lazy. I don't like to take too many things, because I needed more. My patients needed more. I created a fiber supplement with multiple. We have amaranth, we have quinoa, we have psyllium, we have multiple, because I wanted a wide variety of sources for the fiber. We have a turmeric supplement. It's great for inflammation, especially there's studies done on women with arthritis and looking at decreasing pain. There is, we also have a creatine. So I'm super excited about creatine forever.
Okay, tell me about creatine, because I think of creatine and like big muscly
right,
guys
and I
at
did
the
too,
gym.
forever. And then I found Abby Smith Ryan, who is like the world's preeminent female. She's an exercise sports nutrition. I mean, she's just, my God, she's so smart. And she did a deep dive on creatine, wrote this beautiful article looking at creatine through the lifespan for females, and really helped me understand that, we store a lot of creatine, especially when we're younger, and those stores drop off as we get older. And creatine is like critical for mitochondria and function. And so definitely, if you're going to spend the time in the gym and try to stay out of a nursing home and not get osteoporosis, you must lift weights. And so creatine can be additive. Now, there's anecdotal evidence suggesting that creatine would be helpful for, brain fog and for sleep and different things. Not enough data for me to say clearly, but for the benefits to muscle, and if the musculoskeletal, if the muscles are healthy, the bones tend to be healthy. They did do a study looking at creatine, and they just gave it to women with osteoporosis, and they didn't put them in the gym, didn't have them lift weight. They just did that de novo. It didn't do anything for their bones. However, it did a lot for their muscles. And now when you put them in the gym, we see gains in their bone density. So it seems to be synergistic with resistance training in women who are menopausal.
That's so interesting. And the other thing is that women who have already been diagnosed with osteoporosis, they're often really scared of exercise.
Right. They're like, I can't work out. I'm like, this is the most, like, the studies are done on women with osteopenia, with osteoporosis, who are already in a nursing home.
Yeah.
So they already can't take care of themselves, and they're putting them in the gym and having them lift. They're seeing tremendous gains in their, not only, they're decreasing the risk of falls. You don't fall, you tend to not break as often.
Yeah.
And so in the US, 1 in 2 women, 50% of women will have an osteoporotic fracture. I'm not okay with that. That's why I'm laying that solely at the feet of the WHI researchers who continue to preach the unbelievable, it's going to kill you, and somehow we're better off as a society if women just stay off hormones. It's killing us, and we deserve better.
It's just, I just can't even understand. It actually is just so frustrating. It's so frustrating. But anyway. And Rachel, I'd love you to talk about the type of vaginal hormones that we can use. So here in Australia, we do have DHEA, Intra-Rosa. We've only had it for maybe about 2 years, I think. So it's quite new here. And then we don't have any of the rings that you guys have. So we've really got creams and pessaries. But would you have a little bit of a chat about that? And also, one of my big frustrations is, for some reason, patients stop this medication nearly more than anything else. They get a really dramatic improvement, and then it's like, I don't know, it gets too hard or they forget. But I've never seen a medication that people quite stop as often as vaginal hormones.
When I see that happening, the first thing I say to myself is, I screwed up here, right? I screwed up, and we screwed up as a society in our education here. Not, oh, the patient's non-compliant, or, oh, the patient's not doing what they should be doing. It's we are not doing a good enough job with education here. When do our patients stop brushing their teeth? Or or putting sunscreen on in Australia or washing their face. They never stop it. We must equate these things with lifelong sort of activities, but we don't. And so for me, it's getting the patients to do the therapy that works for them. So for creams, a lot of patients don't like putting goopy creams on. They find it unpleasant. They feel like it leaks out and messes up their underwear or their sheets. That's where the pessary might be a really nice option for them. DHEA, I would say, 90% of my patients love the DHEA. I get an occasional 10% of people who say it's too messy. It leaks out, and so I believe them. And you have to switch to a product that works for your patient. My New Year's resolution was to meet people where they are and give them what they need. And so you kind of need to work with the patient in front of you, but they need to understand if they want to leak again, if they want to have pain with sex again, if they want to start getting UTIs, which will kill them, then they should stop their local hormone therapy. But what I find with patients is you cure them. They're so happy. They come back and they say, "Oh, now I have urgency. I must need bladder Botox, or I must need one of these, urgency medications." And I'll ask them about, their vaginal DHEA or their estrogen. Are you still using your product? And they said, "Oh no, you cured me with that." So I stopped it. And then I have to explain again how no, the bladder symptoms are because you stopped the medication. And so I have it too. It happens to me all the time. And so even me, who educates and educates and educates about this, it happens all the time. So it's on us to decide that this is just as important as explaining to patients why they need their insulin, right? And that's the reality. Is it's crazy. These are local therapies, but I believe the way that they work on inflammation and decreasing inflammation of the vagina and the bladder have far-reaching benefits. There are some observational studies that show a decreased risk of heart attacks and strokes and blood clots with people who use these products, probably because they're more active. They're not peeing all over themselves. They don't have as much inflammation in their body. They're sexually active. They're moving their bodies. And I think it's so wonderful, right, to see that data. Yeah, sorry, I went on a long run there.
No, 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 I love it. So can you explain the difference between vaginal estrogen and vaginal DHEA and why you might choose one over the other?
Yes. So the best answer is whatever you like to use and whatever you will use regularly is the right choice for you. Now, in America, we have a cost issue that sometimes it's a little bit harder to get the vaginal DHEA for our patients than the vaginal estrogen. If you don't have any insurance, then the vaginal estrogen cream in the United States is the cheapest. It's about $13 for a tube, which lasts about 2.5 months or so. And so it has to be accessible to our patients. Now, we know that the vulva, the vagina, the urethra, the bladder, they're not just filled with estrogen receptors, but they have androgen receptors as well. Testosterone, you're the greatest in the world because you're the only people that have a testosterone product approved for women. So you understand hopefully the importance of androgens. But what we are understanding is that androgens are not just important for libido, but they're actually important for genital and urinary health as well. And the vaginal DHEA product is the only product that we have in America that has androgens in it. So DHEA is the precursor to estrogen and testosterone. So if you place the suppository vaginally, your body converts it into estrogen and testosterone. And so it gives a really nice genital and bladder support to prevent urinary tract infections, to make sex not painful, to help with arousal and orgasm. Now, truthfully, vaginal estrogen does those things too, and we would love to see more data, right, comparing them and finding new products and things like that. But again, ultimately, use a product it's on the menu, and you should choose it if it's on the menu.
Rachel, why do you think that these things have for so many years just been swept under the carpet and, women have just felt that they need to put up with it and nearly there's been like a badge of honor for those who managed without any external sort of help?
I think it's society, right? We live in a society that when women age out of sex, women age out of the quality of life. The old woman who's, not active, who's in a nursing home with dementia and UTI. It's sort of this idea of like, well, this is what it's meant to be. This is what happens. This is how aging works. Suck it up, lady. We have this badge of honor. I didn't use any pain medicine in childbirth. Can you imagine bragging? I didn't use any pain medicine when I had my appendix out, or like it is this strange sort of oh, I did it naturally. I did everything naturally. And it doesn't make sense. Like, I wear contact lenses so that I can see. Like, I choose technology. Otherwise, I would not be a very productive member of society, right? I get in a car to drive places. That's not very natural. So we have to understand that when you pick and choose what you want to do, right, there are consequences. So that's not to say you must put hormones in your body, but there are real consequences if you don't put hormones into your body. And those consequences may be deadly, right? And so that is us. My job is to educate on the menu. Your job is to decide what items you want to pick off of it.
And in terms of do we have a statistic that we know? So if a woman decides not to take systemic HRT or menopausal hormone therapy, she does not take vaginal hormones, do we know what percentage of women will go on to develop the genital urinary syndrome of menopause? Like, I would assume it's really high, but do we know that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different papers here. I mean, I've seen papers as high as 80 something percent. A colleague of mine, Dr. Una Lee, who's one of the co-chairs of the guidelines committee, she did an excellent paper recently where they interviewed, I believe it was 1,500 women, and 100% of them had a symptom of GSM. And I think, where it gets confusing is most of our gynecologists or primary care docs don't associate the urinary symptoms with menopause. That's a marketing problem. We have screwed up the marketing here, and we are sorry, and that's what we're trying to make up for lost time, is that your leakage, your frequency, your urgency, you're getting up in the middle of the night to pee, that's menopause, my friend. And if you have it and you're 70, it's because of menopause. If you have it because you're 90, it's because of menopause. If you have it, this is where it gets really confusing. If you have it at age 35, it's because of menopause. Well, sort of. It's actually because of the age-related decline in testosterone. So it's actually a perimenopause sort of situation where it is not because of estrogen, probably. It is probably because of the decrease in testosterone. Do we need more data? Of course. Sue Davis cannot do all of the research for every human on earth. We need lots more people in this space doing research and looking at it from multiple different angles.
So you've touched on testosterone, and many of our listeners are educated, but some people are still confused that testosterone is for men and estrogen is for women. I wonder whether you could do a quick review for us and explain why testosterone is something that we really should be thinking about a lot more in women.
Yeah, so testosterone is a human hormone. Everybody makes testosterone. Women from their ovaries and their adrenal glands, men from their testicles and their adrenal glands. So testosterone, you actually need testosterone even to form estrogen. And so if you put everything in the same units, which we don't typically do, at least not in the US, is we have much more androgens and testosterone in our body than we do estrogen. And so it's not a feeling. It's not a like I want to believe that estrogen is more women only have estrogen. Like, it is a scientific fact. No one disagrees with this, that we have more testosterone in our body than estrogen, and that there is an age-related decline in testosterone, and that when you give women back testosterone, it improves their low libido. Like, that is a globally consensus, like, sort of document, and the research is very clear on that. Now, where the research is not as clear on, and we would love to see more data and larger studies, is what else does testosterone do, right? It's testosterone's in the pelvic floor. It's in the urethra. So can it help with prolapse? Can it help with urinary incontinence? We anecdotally see that all the time with patients. Does it help with arousal? Does it help with orgasm? There's plenty of data and on that as well. Does it help with mood? Does it help with anxiety, depression? There are emerging studies that seem to show it's true. Now, again, the problem is because we don't have a product in the United States, the research is really, really dragging here, right? Like, we're scratching the surface, and so we'd love to see an increase in interest, and way more. People beg. All we do is say, well, there's not research. We want research. To pull off a research project is really challenging, right? Like, you have to get funding, which we're struggling for in the United States right now. You have to get a team together. You have to get approval. You have to design the study. You have to get statisticians on board. You have to plan it. And then you have to have the brave women show up and agree to either take the medicine or the placebo, which they don't know which they're going to have. And then you have to follow it for a long time. This is a gajillion-dollar project to carry out, and so unfortunately, we're moving real slow here.
And what do you say to people who, there's definitely some people within the medical community who are very fixated on that because we don't have randomized controlled trials for X, Y, and Z. Therefore, we shouldn't be using these things until we have them. I certainly find that very frustrating because I think, well, what are we meant to do? Wait for 10 years and just say to the people, oh, well, bad luck. But what is your thinking around that?
So my thought process is I love science and I love logic, and I use the both of those things together to help me. When it was the height of COVID and we were, anxiously awaiting, they were able to pull together randomized trials and they were able to get the science done, and they moved forward and they could do science quickly. But the reality is there were a lot of people doing a lot of not evidence-based things, right? And people were saying, "Well, we should do this, we should do that." And so this is always how science has worked, but we actually have a lot of data. We have tons of data in men. We have tons of data in trans men, right? We have tons of data in women, in cis women. We have tons of data in postmenopausal women, and we have data that we need more, but in premenopause and perimenopause for sure. So it's not like we're acting in the dark and there's zero data. Here, look at something like GLP-1s. Okay, GLP-1 started for, I can't remember. This is your field, not mine. Was it diabetes or weight loss first? Diabetes first?
Diabetes, yeah.
Okay, so it starts as a drug for diabetes, and all these diabetics take this drug and say, "Holy crap, I'm losing all this weight. I've never felt better. This is amazing." And so they said, "Oh, well, it's a weight loss drug now, right? Look at this side effect of weight loss. This is miraculous." So now it becomes a weight loss drug. And guess what? Everyone says, "Oh my God, I've got this other side effect. I'm having fewer heart attacks. I'm having less inflammation. I'm having all these other sort of things. I'm also having a lot of nausea. I'm also having a lot of, decrease in food." So we see, like, unfortunately, this is how science works, is we find all these side effects for things and then we do. So I give testosterone to a woman for low libido. And then I listen. And what does she always say to me? About 4 to 6 months starting testosterone, when we make sure her blood levels are going up, she says to me these magic words over and over again. "I feel like myself again." That's what I hear over and over and over again. "I feel like myself again." Well, that's a hard questionnaire to put on the FDA and, like, get people to fill out. But it's mood, it's energy, it's just a libido, it's just interest in life. It is seeing color again. It is being able to orgasm that second time. It is, feeling like you're in this relation. It's all the things. But they keep saying it over and over and over again. "Dr. Rubin, I feel like myself." And when I've heard it for the 1 millionth time, and then the patient comes to me and she's miserable, like that patient that you first, told me about, the one who feels like they're not connecting with their partner, that they don't even recognize their own body, that they don't feel like themselves. How could I not advocate for that person to say, "Well, look what I see. You don't see the future. I see the future because a million people have come to me and said, I feel like myself. And I want that for you. And so here's what it might look like. And here's what the menu looks like. And it doesn't happen overnight. I'm not a magician. I don't have magic, but my batting average is unbelievable. There's a reason I love doing what I do and I'm obsessed with it, is because I want that option for every human. Whether they take it or not, I want them to get the option. But the problem is we're not even giving people the option.
I agree. And it's so satisfying because, again, I suppose slightly in reverse, I have patients who often present with, I just don't feel like myself. That's often the opening line. And I also love, I tend to do quite a few little questionnaires with my patients, but when they come back for a review, I often just repeat the modified green score. And just to see that score improve from like 47 to 15 or something, you're like, yes, you feel like, it feels like such a win for both clinician and the patient because you can just see the person walks in and they feel like you're giving them their life back again.
People don't believe me. My clinic is full of women in their 50s and 60s who come to me and they say, "Ruben, work is amazing. I'm killing it at work, better than ever. I love my partner. We're having great sex. I feel good in my body. Can I please have refills?" And they put their hand out. And over and over and over again. And people don't believe me. I was like, do you understand this is not real life? Like, this is not real life. And it's just wild. I mean, it's so addicting. And sometimes after a couple years, I'll read them our first visit. I'll sort of read them the narrative of their first visit, and they're like in shock because they don't even remember that person and how bad it was. People forget pain, thankfully, and they never remember how badly they were feeling.
I think that's why we keep having babies, because we forget how horrendous it is in that moment.
That's the only reason. That has to be the reason. Otherwise, no one would do it.
This episode is brought to you by my 16-week Rediscover You program, designed specifically for women navigating the challenges of perimenopause and menopause. If you're dealing with disrupted sleep, mood changes, or unexplained weight gain, this evidence-based program combines medical guidance, practical tools, and a supportive community to help you take control of your health. Women have reported significant improvements in symptom management of sleep quality and overall well-being. As an All About You listener, when you mention the podcast, you'll gain priority access for our next intake. Click the link in the show notes to learn more and join. I'd love to help you rediscover the vibrant, confident version of yourself. The other thing I find frustrating is we talk a lot about vaginal dryness as a symptom of the peri and postmenopause, but it makes it sort of sound, oh, it's just a bit of dry skin, it's just a bit dry. And it really sort of underplays how significant this issue is. Can you explain to the audience a little bit more what it really means for people?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we dismiss it until we realize, like, people go to the doctor for dry eyes. They go to the doctor for dry mouth. Like, there's a lot of things that are dry that we go seek medical attention for and that we don't blow off. We're like, oh, it's just a little bit of dry eye. And you're like, no, it's a massive problem when your eyelids, like, don't slide over your eyeballs, right? It's completely disruptive to your day. And so nobody gets vaginal dryness until they have vaginal dryness or talk to women with vaginal dryness. And then you're like, this is very, very uncomfortable. It's a big problem, let alone more urinary tract infections, pain with intimacy, burning when you pee, getting up at night to urinate. So hormones and hormone receptors are in all cells, in all organs of the body. And I think part of the miseducation about midlife health is that menopause just means you can't get pregnant and you have hot flashes. And those are symptoms of what happens from low hormones, not actually what's happening to your body. And so in your pelvis, you have your bladder, your vagina, your vulva, your sexual structures, your clitoris, and they all change, or what we call atrophy or decline, in midlife. That can happen before your periods stop. It can happen in perimenopause. It can actually happen when you're breastfeeding, because that's a low estrogen state. And certainly gets worse post-menopause, to the point where I'll see a woman 7 years post-periods and she'll be like, how is this menopause? My last period was 7 years ago. And I'm like, you don't understand the consequences of low hormones keep happening and compounding. And so all of that constellation that I talked about, from the bladder to the infections to pain with sex to dryness, is called genital urinary syndrome of menopause, because it just helps explain more the constellation of pelvic issues because of low estrogen.
And so, Kelly, what is the best way of treating this genital urinary syndrome of menopause?
Putting the hormones back. So local hormone therapy. Vaginal estrogen is the most common. There are variants of that. And people just have to realize, like, because people will be like, what moisturizer, what, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, those are Band-Aids and they can make tissues feel better, but you're not actually regrowing healthy tissue. You're not actually giving the cells what they need to function optimally. So in many countries, vaginal estrogen is over the counter. It's not in America. It actually can be not in Australia. It can be pretty cheap. We've got some places, we have an amazing online pharmacy in America. You can get your prescription transferred. It's $13 for a tube. So I always joke, I'm like, not many things are actually getting cheaper right now in the world, but vaginal estrogen is. And it should be, because this medication's been around for over 50 years. The most expensive part of this medication is the tube that it comes in. And so anybody who is paying, $200, because I'll see it in our country, insurance companies will make money off of you, that it doesn't have to cost that much. Because once you stop, this is the other myth, I'll just use a tube of cream, I'll stop, right? It's like, no, this is like sunscreen, seat belts, flossing your teeth. is like the benefits only come while you're using it and then will stop again when you stop using it.
I'd like to stay on the subject of this, Kelly. One of the things I find, as you said, people stop it. They also, like in the US, we pull out a leaflet and it's got all these scary potential side effects. I have to say, I do frequently get phone calls back to the clinic because sometimes people are overwhelmed with the amount of information and they'll phone and they'll say, oh, I've just opened the vaginal estrogen. I'm really scared by the leaflet. And, you know, what is the message around how long we're going to need to continue using this? It's pretty much a forever kind of thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. As long as you want it to work, you know. I mean, and it's funny because we, you know, really with vaginal estrogen, so just for the listeners, it's really low dose. It's not considered systemic, and the fact that it doesn't increase your blood levels measurably, it's very low dose compared to even low dose hormone therapy. And so really understanding this is skincare and skincare for down there. And like you stop using your skincare, your skin stops getting the benefit of the skincare. We joke and we say you can take it to the grave. But as far as it being a preventative treatment, right? In our healthcare system, we're a sick care system. So we don't really work on preserving function. We only work on treating you once you're already broken. So there's really a strong argument to be made that maybe 55, kind of certainly if you're having symptoms, just starting on the skincare, because if 50 to 80% of women will experience genital urinary syndrome of menopause, why are we waiting for them to rack up the bills of treatment and urinary tract infections and risks of antibiotics instead of using a preventative therapy? And in people who start it because of UTIs or because of pain with sex, we have them keep using it as a preventative therapy. So it makes sense to really push the conversation on prevention better than treatment.
Kelly, what about this cohort of women who for the last 20 years, so if you think of the women who are maybe 70 now, who kind of missed out on having hormones because of the DHEA, and obviously I've worked in Northern Ireland and in Australia over that period of time, and definitely hormones were so out. Like we were pretty much told to get everybody off them 20 years ago, and prescribing was historically very low. And I believe there is this big cohort of women who unfortunately had the greatest disservice done to them. But, you know, they're those patients who come into me always with a little tub of urine. They've just endlessly got UTIs. They literally always have a little tub of urine in their handbag. I think I've got another UTI. I think I've got another UTI. And I know that within our audience, we definitely have health practitioners and lay people. But what do you think about, like I will put those women onto vaginal estrogen, but I know that some doctors and health professionals are quite concerned to do that in an older person. Could you provide us with some thoughts or reassurance around that?
Yeah, with vaginal estrogen, I would say the consensus is now any age, any woman can use it. Is the only asterisk would be if you're actively being treated for breast cancer, get the blessing of the oncologist. But even then, we've got pretty good data saying even active breast cancer treatment can take it. Because again, remember, I'm going to start you on your vaginal estrogen. I'm going to check your blood levels. You know, I don't check blood levels, but I'm saying one could check blood levels, and you're not raising anybody above the postmenopausal level as far as estradiol goes, because this is a year's worth of vaginal estrogen is about equivalent to one oral estradiol 1 milligram pill.
It's amazing. It's just so little.
Yeah, it's just crazy. It's literally skincare, and why anybody would withhold that to anybody makes no sense. And in America, we have an active petition to our Food and Drug Administration right now because doctors 2 times have formally requested the FDA to pull the boxed warning off of vaginal estrogen, and they've declined 2 times. So now we're taking it to the people, and we're saying, listen, the FDA works for the people, not the doctors, not pharma. We want the people, and there's a petition on letstalkmenopause.org for anybody who wants to do that. You do have to live in the U.S. to do it because it's our FDA. But we're basically saying the failure to take the incorrect messaging off of the label is actually actively harming people because it's withholding a very safe medication because of inaccurate messaging.
So what does it say on your label?
Probable dementia. Not possible. Probable dementia. Stroke, heart attack, liver disease, blood clots, which all stemmed from the WHI with oral synthetic medications, so different product than local, bioidentical vaginal estrogen. And a lot of those had been walked back, right? So the label is wrong for everything, but the FDA put that label on. We don't care what dose. We don't care if it's synthetic or bioidentical. Just anything that's estrogen gets this label, and now basically it's all wrong. But we're like, low-hanging fruit is the vaginal estrogen. Take it off of that. We might let other people fight the other estrogens. But the vaginal one's such low-hanging fruit. We're like, get it off of this product.
So, Kelly, I know that you're always very open and honest around sex and, trying to give some sex education to adults. One of the things that I see a lot in my clinic, in fact, it's probably mentioned in almost every menopause transition consult, is women either complaining of low libido or painful sex and a clear feeling of guilt towards their partner. Often there's tears shed because they're really worried that their partner is going to leave them. They often kind of, I call it lie back and think of England. They put up with it or do it just to please him, because they feel like that's kind of their wifely or partner duty. But I'd love you to talk to us a little bit. I mean, I certainly feel like everyone thinks everyone's having lots of sex, but the reality is, and I admit, obviously I'm seeing a skewed population, because obviously it's only the people who have a problem come and see me. But the reality is that in midlife, when it's mostly the time of peri and postmenopause for people are struggling with sex. I'd love you to talk to that. And I suppose in ways to reassure anyone listening that they're not alone in this situation.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason I wrote the book, is because the sex education just doesn't, when we get sex education, it is, you're a teenager, maybe if you're not like a junior teenager. You're not in a long-term committed relationship. Your body's not going through midlife hormone changes. You don't have a full-time job with stresses and kids. Like, midlife sex is a different beast than trying not to get pregnant and trying not to get a disease when you're 17 years old, right? Like, some people still have to worry about that, but that's not all we have to worry about with midlife sex. And so it's really the adult sex education that we never got. And so we got crappy education. And now we have a problem. We never learned to talk about sex when it was going well, which would set us up for talking about it when it's not going well, right? So communication was never taught. Consent was never taught. The fact that doing it for duty or guilt sex, that's not sexy. That doesn't help desire. And as far as pain goes, I have women come to me and they're like, I have two problems. I have low sexual desire and I have pain. And I always like taking problems away from people. So I'm like, no, you have one problem. You have pain with sex. You'll never desire hitting your finger with a hammer, right? So it's like, you got to address the pain. You have to refocus the fact that this is supposed to be fun. This is adult play. We're not supposed to take it so seriously. And like, to get people back to like, what's the point of sex? The point of sex is not just to like put a penis in a vagina to keep a marriage intact, right? Like, there's so much more than that. And sometimes we have to go way back. And that's why I wrote the book, because I realized I can recommend lube. I can give the guy Viagra. I can give her vaginal estrogen. I can send you to a pelvic floor physio so the pain's better. Like, I can make you have a perfect pelvis. But if you think sex is a chore, if you've never had pleasure, you're doing it for somebody else's pleasure. If you got raised to think your body is dirty, if you can't touch yourself, right? There's all of that. It's really the biopsychosocial that ties into your adult sex life. And so it's like, I can't just be good at biology and have a good sex life. You've got to be good at communication. You've got to be good at understanding how women are socialized to not want too much. It's not about you, right? And then they're like, I don't want it. And I'm like, it's never been about you. Why would you want that, right? And really just re-educating women to be like, this can be yours. And sometimes it's very hard to be like, what do you want? They're like, I don't even know what's on the menu, right? It's like, you can kind of work backwards and be like, what don't you want? And then kind of dive into a sex life from there. And it's interesting to look at the research on people who have great sex lives, right? So you're like, what's the secret to a great sex life according to the people who are like, I have a great sex life, right? Let's ask them. not one in like the top 10 do they say, I have a great sex life because I spontaneously desire sex. It's not in the top, right? And so many people are like, I don't spontaneously desire sex, so I don't have a sex life. And I'm like, it's not an essential ingredient. And really kind of, one of my chapters of the book is F desire, right? Because so many people will stop because they're like, I don't really want it right now. And I'm like, of course you don't want it right now. Like, you're on a podcast with me across the ocean, like talking, right? Like, you have to put yourself in a pleasing sexual context that actually benefits you. And then you're like, this is real nice. I forgot. This is good, right? And like understanding how to transition into that sexual environment instead of like, we're not light switches. We don't just want it all the time. And that's incredibly unnormal thing.
And while we're talking about this, let's talk a little bit about using testosterone in women to help with desire.
Well, you guys are the leaders with availability. But what I hear about Australia is, although you have a female dosed product, it's called Androfem, it's hard to get it. It's expensive, and it's still hard to find a doctor who will prescribe it. And you'll only prescribe, you all in Australia will only prescribe it, y'all, for low desire. And so women contact me and they're like, should I lie to my Australian physician and tell them I have low desire so I can get testosterone?
Well, it's like anything, you just got to find the right doctor. But I think that, so Androfem, we are really lucky. It costs about $90 to $100 Australian dollars. So that's, I think, about...
Is that for a month's worth or 3 months worth?
No, so that will last
How long
you.
does the
It
tube
will
last?
last you 3 months. So it's got 50 grams in the tube, and our starting dose is 0.5. So it's going to last you 100 days roughly. So it lasts quite a long time.
That's
and
good.
That's roughly, so I don't know, 140 or 150 US dollars. But look, it's fantastic that we have it. It does come with a really stupid syringe, I'm going to say.
But they're changing that.
Oh, are
they're
they?
changing the packaging.
It's so frustrating.
I know a lot.
You're in the know. But yes.
I know things that are coming down the pipeline. It will get better.
So anyone listening who has just started testosterone or is thinking about starting testosterone, Kelly, what can they expect? Are they going to get a result or an improvement in a week, 2 weeks, 3 months? How long is it going to take?
Like, I always back up and be like, I can't be the crazy doctor that tells women to go on testosterone if I don't educate them to be like, ovaries make testosterone.
Yeah.
Right. So you always have to step back, because otherwise they're like, you're trying to turn me into a man. Then it's like, no, I'm just trying to give you what you had when you were 30. So ovaries make testosterone. Via testosterone, it converts into estrogen. So we have about, women make testosterone in 3 different ways. Ovary, about 50% of it. Adrenal gland, another about 50% of it. But there's also end organ conversion, where we're making it in muscles, in brain, in end organs. So specifically in the ovary, we decrease our ovarian production starting in our 20s. And it's more of a linear, to the data that we have, right? And I would say I would love more studies on it. The data we have, you get about 50% of your ovarian testosterone in midlife compared to when you were in your 20s. So certainly there's nothing magical about your last period happening and being in postmenopause as far as testosterone goes. It's linearly declining from much earlier on. And I think that corresponds with the highest rate of distress with low desire is in the perimenopause age group. When you look at the studies looking at low desire plus bother by low desire. There's 80-year-olds who have low desire. They're less bothered by it, probably for a partnership reason, like if you don't have somebody to be sexual with, right? So the linear decrease in testosterone lines up with the perimenopausal highest rate of bother with low desire. Testosterone is a brain hormone, right? I think we did an error when we labeled these sex hormones, because that makes it sound extra. That makes it sound just like it's for sex. But I always ask people, where does libido come from? It doesn't come from the clitoris, right? Like libido's a mood. Moods from the brain. Therefore, testosterone works in the brain by influencing moods. And then people are like, oh. And then it's also true that there isn't one spot in the brain for mood that only has the testosterone receptors. The testosterone receptors are everywhere. Louise Newsom's group just published an article this summer looking at mood and testosterone, and they had women already on estrogen, so they didn't adjust any other hormones at the time. And then they measured domains for mood and cognition at baseline, and then 4 months after starting testosterone, there's a 50% increase in mood and cognition. Now, I would love to see a placebo study, but the haters will say some of that's placebo, and I'm like, okay, but like lots of things are placebo, and they do well, right? And it correlates to how well men's moods get when their testosterone's replaced. So I don't think it's a huge fluke, but it's not just libido that gets better; cognition and mood gets better. But to answer your question, it doesn't usually happen overnight. I do get some women who are like, aha, testosterone, that took a week. But a lot of women are like 4 months, 6 months kicking in. And when you dose it physiologically, which is what you do with the cream, or in America, commonly we'll either compound the cream or we'll dose a male product at 1/10 the dose to get a female dosing. When you get transdermal administration, it is slower of an onset. And I think that's good. I think the side effects come in. We do pellets. Do you have pellets in Australia?
Not really.
Not
a
really.
little bit, but not really.
Yeah, good for you. That's probably because you have legitimate products. Like we don't have legitimate products, right? So women are kind of forced to use pellets. But that's more of a 0 to 300 overnight phenomenon, and so it's kind of can be a shock to the body. And that's where you can see a lot of side effects, and plus it pushes people to a very high level. You're going to start to see more androgenic side effects than if you use the appropriately dosed, which will get you up to a nice level. It's hard to get you too high, but it can take 4 to 6 months. I've got some people that are like, at 4 months, I was like, oh, there's my libido, right? Like, it'll just be like, you start to notice things. And I like that it's more subtle and like sustained than not.
That's my experience too with my patients. I definitely feel that with estradiol, you get a result, an improvement in various symptoms really quite quickly. I feel like testosterone's a bit more of a slow burn. And I usually say to patients, look, we're probably going to have to use 2 tubes of this before we make a decision as to whether it's helped or not.
Nice. I mean, I think part of that is like you got to up-regulate your receptors. Everybody forgets to talk about the receptors. But it's like, we don't have a test for that, right? It's hard to measure. But it's like, remember, it's not always the dose of the testosterone, but it's like, how active are the receptors? You haven't had testosterone in your body for 10, 15 years. You kind of got to upregulate. Your body's like, oh, I can stop looking for this because it's not here, right? So you got to like upregulate the receptors again, get things to kind of get back into where it used to be.
Dr. Shauna, can you take hormones for the rest of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what I'm planning to do, to be honest, trying to make up for lost time. I mean, I think it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. So, for example, if you're taking hormones and you're hoping that it's going to do the preventative things like, for example, help prevent heart disease, if you take your hormones for 5 years, then during that time, it's very protective against heart disease. It doesn't mean you can't go out and start smoking and eat donuts every day, but it's very protective. But the moment you stop that HRT, you actually then move into the same realm and you start having the same risks for not having the hormones. So in my mind, my reading of the evidence is for the vast majority of women, not all women, but the vast majority of women, I think that you would probably want to take it long term. And, even if you think of vaginal hormones, which is not necessarily what we're talking about with HRT, but to me, that is definitely one that you would want to take, I think, forever. When I think of all these older women in nursing homes with their recurrent urinary tract infections, their recurrent spells of delirium with their recurrent UTIs, their urinary incontinence, their prolapse symptoms, I often think, my goodness, how would that have been changed if one, they had been on HRT or vaginal hormones, but if they were also kept on them, and what would the trajectory look like? So you're definitely going to be prizing them from my cold dead hands.
And I think a lot of women would like to know, does the brain fog go away? Does it get better?
Yeah, look, I think it does. And I think it often improves quite dramatically. Estrogen definitely helps a lot. And which we understand now, because we know that estrogen is we've always thought of estrogen as being this hormone that's all about our ovaries and eggs, but we're now realizing that it's from everything to do with our brain, our skin, every organ in the body. So absolutely giving estrogen back will improve things. Lots of women will say that. And also testosterone seems to be really quite helpful as well. So I think, it really does depend on the person. But if we think about it, like libido is a brain symptom. Libido is something that is in our brain mostly, particularly in women. And so we know that testosterone helps libido. And I think it's naive to think that that's the only job that testosterone does. I think a lot of women will find that their mental clarity improves with testosterone as well.
Now, I've heard you talk about sleep hygiene. What is sleep hygiene and how can women improve their sleep hygiene?
So, yeah, sleep hygiene, it's always a funny thing. I always remember even at medical school when they introduced the concept of sleep hygiene, I always thought it was the weirdest phrase it's really looking at the habits and the environment that you place around your sleep routines. And I suppose in simple terms, it's how you're going to clean up your routine to make it as conducive to a sleep environment. So I think whenever we think of sleep hygiene for any person, but especially, someone in perimenopause or menopause, so the first thing would be that obviously we know that there's something wrong with that sort of heat sensor in the brain. And often for some women, it's just running hot like I did. And for other women, it is that overwhelming flushes or night sweats. So the first thing is to keep your bedroom quite cool. You definitely don't want to be overheating. So keeping your bedroom probably a couple of degrees cooler than you think you want it to be. And the other reason for that is we actually know the human body needs to drop about 0.5 to 1 degree to actually fall asleep. And that's why it's so hard to go to sleep on a really hot night, because you just can't get that temperature drop. So I think keeping your room cool. I also think that having your room your bedroom as an environment that is actually conducive to sleep is really helpful. So, having, all those unpaid bills laid across your bedroom floor, or maybe having all the black bin bags that you've cleared out your wardrobe 2 weeks before and not getting rid of them. So I think it's just, being sensible about trying to make the environment really nice. I think, we know that darkness helps. And, I'm very, very guilty of this one. But, it's not having that light from your phone or your iPad. So it's very tempting to lie in bed and look at your phone and scroll and things. And there's multiple reasons why that's not helpful. One, it's very activating to the brain. So you're kind of waking yourself up. But it's also the light is confusing the brain, because we want melatonin to be released to tell our body it's dark, it's time to go to sleep. But then we're shining this bright light. And so our body's going, oh, hold on, actually, maybe it's not nighttime. So let's turn that melatonin off. So I think darkness, coolness, I think the bed with lots of layers, so that you've got like a throw or something on the bottom that you can pull up if you get cold, but you've got layers that you can just sleep with a sheet. I do think it's probably time, if you're in the position to do it, is to buy yourself some really nice sheets, trying not to use, man-made fibers and things that are going to wick away moisture and make you feel most comfortable. And then it's also about thinking about what you do before you even get towards your bedroom. So,
Sure.
not having really stressful phone calls with people that, wind you up, or, not watching some really scary, murder mystery on TV or, documentary about a serial killer is probably not going to be conducive, or not having a really heavy meal or eating lots of food that are going to have, you're going to sit there, and we've all done it, eating the popcorn and the Maltesers, watching a movie, but then expecting yourself to, 20 minutes later to be trying to go to sleep. So it's just being very mindful about, your environment and what you're doing beforehand. A lot of women will tell me that they can no longer drink alcohol. We don't entirely understand why. And there is some studies going on about that now. But, alcohol is often something that people struggle with in peri and postmenopause. They'll tell you that they get a terrible sleep. They get waking up during the night. So definitely avoiding alcohol. Caffeine's a bit of a no-brainer. We know it's a stimulant. So not having a coffee, late at night, so it's going to keep you awake. But, also other drinks. So lots of people will drink, fizzy drinks and Coke and things at night. And again, you're just giving yourself another stimulant and making it really hard to go to sleep. I think the other things are, trying to have a bit of a routine. We all think back to our teens whenever we wanted, liked at the weekends to have a big sleep in and get up really late. But what we know is actually for sleep, it's really better to be consistent. So, trying, to have a reasonably consistent bedtime and a reasonably consistent waking up time. Otherwise, your body doesn't really quite understand what routine you want to have. And I think the reason that sleep hygiene is so important in this period of life is that, look, we're already feeling exhausted. We're already feeling fatigued. We're already feeling not great. Going to sleep and staying asleep is already a massive challenge. So you want to kind of have all the other bits, all your other ducks in a row, so that if you do get that opportunity to actually go to sleep, that you can. I think also they say to try and keep your bedroom for sleep and intimacy only, and try not to have it for TV watching or eating or whatever, or studying, so that you're not always associating your bedroom with something stressful.
Yeah, sure. And what do you want women to know about perimenopause and menopause?
I think for me, what I want people to know is I want them to understand what it is. And ideally, I'd love them to understand long before they get there, so that it's not, frying pan in the face kind of experience. And I think the other thing is that I want women to know that it's actually not something to be terrified about, because actually can be really proactive. So, it's about trying to get, you're eating great. So you're having your enough protein, and you're having your fiber, and you're on your omega-3 fatty acids, and you're hitting all those nutritional goals, and that you've been building your muscle, and that you're going into it with great bone mass, and you've got your mental health in a good place. So maybe you've already found yourself a great psychologist who you talk things through with, and they're there to give you support, and that you've chatted it through with your family and your partner, so that that if you do start to go into a period of time that feels really, really tricky, that you're going to have an ability, or that you're going to have a bit of a deal with your best friend or your mom or your partner, that they're going to ask you like what is going on, and that you're going to be okay with that. So I think it's about being proactive and not being scared about it. And I think also knowing that there's so many positive things that come with this time of life. I think lots of women, and you can read it lots of places online, that people will say they've just got to the point where they're deep down much more comfortable with their opinions and who they are. They're much more clear about what their boundaries are and what they're happy to say yes and no to. And I think for a lot of women as well, it does bring some freedoms to explore, career or entrepreneurship or friendships or exercise or hobbies that they've never had time to do. So I think what I'd like people to know is that it doesn't need to be this doom and gloom thing, that it's going to be horrific. I think it's about getting a team around you, and, even just having a really good friendship group, or even an online community that you can ask the questions, and probably not to bury your head in the sand. Because even if you are one of these unicorns, and there are some who sail through the whole experience, the realities are that the postmenopause brings health challenges to all women, whether we like it or not. And it does change our trajectory of risk for heart disease, for osteoporosis, and also for probably dementia as well. And also for strength, for, being as fit as we want to be, increased risks as we get older of falling over, etc. So I think, go into this naively at your peril, and go in armed with as much information. And I think that you can not only survive, but absolutely thrive.